Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this discussion. As the title says, we're going to be talking about smashing the corporate culture status quo. So today's discussion is really about what can we do when it comes to the culture within the organizations that we work for? What is it that we can think about? What things can we put in place? And how can we start thinking differently about culture? So we can start shifting it from one that is possibly a more of a toxic environment to one that is more of a positive environment where people feel they can bring their best selves into the workplace. My name is Genevieve. I am the founder and CEO of a consultancy called The Mindful Tilt. And my background has predominantly been in large corporate environments before joining a startup organization in the UK. And within the startup environment, I really spent a lot of time with leaders discussing culture and looking at what elements within the working environment are contributing to a bad or a toxic or a not optimal corporate culture. I did a lot of coaching for individuals that were experiencing burnout. That is obviously an outcome or a symptom of an environment or a culture that is not conducive to optimal functioning. So really, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I've seen the real negative impacts that corporate culture can have on individuals. And I'm sure many of you will agree with me when I say that culture is something that's quite notorious to measure. It's quite difficult to measure. It's quite intangible. What is culture? How do we start shifting culture? What are the things that work? What are the things that don't work? And there are definitely many ways we can positively impact on culture. And that really, we can start looking at the lived experience that people are having at work. And our panelists today have actually look at this topic from very different angles. I wanted to just bring a little bit of stats into the picture as well, because I think it's quite important for us to understand how important it is to focus on building positive, functional, and optimal corporate cultures. Burnout, I mentioned it earlier, is an occupational phenomenon. It is something that is a product of people's experience of work and the experience of the people that they work with, the work that they do, the impact that their working environment has on them as individuals, the impact that their relationships with others, with leaders have on them, on their well-being, on their workplace well-being. So burnout is one way in which we can have a look at whether or not there is signs of a toxic culture within an organization. In a recent study that we did, we found that 1 in 4 people are at high risk of burnout. High risk of burnout meaning they've got experiencing physical and psychological symptoms of stress, but also the symptoms of burnout. So that feeling of, I just can't bring anything more of myself into the work that I do. And nearly 1/3 of the employees that we were involved in the study had a strong intention to leave an organization. And very often we hear that saying, people don't leave an organization, they leave managers. So what within the environment can we really look at shifting and changing so that people have a more positive experience? In the same study, what we did also find is that high risk of burnout is costing an organization almost 11 times more than people who are experiencing manageable levels of stress. So somebody who's at higher risk of burnout will cost your organization 11 times more. And that's quite a big number. So if you're thinking about how do you make a business case around culture work, there's definitely stats around the costs of a bad or a toxic working environment. Yes, what one word would you use to describe your current culture? You can see at the top, you just go to menti.com and then you use that code. If you just pop that code in, and then it'll ask you this particular question. You put your response in, and we will see all the responses come up in real time. So please, audience, love your input. What word would you use to describe your current culture within any organization that you work within the organization that you work in currently? And if you prefer to not use work overload, I hear that all the time. And if you prefer to not use menti.com, you're welcome just to pop it into the chat and we'll just collect those responses as well. And your work overload is a really interesting one, because sometimes it's not just the amount of work that we have to do or the time within which we have to do it, but it's all the other things that contribute to that work overload. It's bureaucracy, processes. I don't have access to the right people, or my laptop is outdated, or I don't have access to the software that I need. So all of those things contribute to work. Sometimes it's not just the amount of work we have to do. Punitive, toxic, unsafe. Okay, friendly, that's amazing. I'd like to come work in your environment. Entrepreneurial, I really like that. Unfair. Change fatigue. Lack of accountability. Ethical leadership, I like that. So we've got a mix here of positive experiences. Micromanagement, I hear that a lot as well. Connected, that's a really nice word. Inspired. Amazing. Thank you so much for your responses. So the next question that I want to pose to you is this one. What's the one word you would use to describe your desired culture? If you could wave a magic wand, and if you could really have the most incredible workplace culture, what's the one word you would use to describe that? Transparent, authentic, state of flow, collaborative. Panelists, I hope you noting these words, because when you're speaking through your inputs and your perspectives on culture, I mean, these are the things that we want to help our attendees to think through, and like, all right, how do I create a collaborative environment? How do I create one that's inclusive, transparent, authentic, flexible, fair? Preventative. I really love that word. Absolutely, absolutely. Within the startup environment that I was working for in the UK, we were all about preventative data, all about looking at how is the working environment impacting on people, and what can we do upstream. There's this beautiful quote by Desmond Tutu, is don't know it verbatim, but pretty much he was saying is, can we stop pulling people out the river and find out why are they falling into the river in the first place? So how do we prevent them from falling into the river? I think it's really, really crucial for any corporate cultures. How do we get more proactive? How do we prevent people from burning out and from experiencing the negative impacts of workplace stress? Considerate, mature, empowering, safe, psychologically safe, absolutely incredible. All right, so we can see the differences, right, between what we the current state of culture versus where we want to move to in the desired state. So let me jump into our panel discussion today, so we can really get into the meat of how do we move from current state into desired state. So thank you, Sean. I know I'm going to be asking you a question first, but maybe what we can do is just have a quick introduction of all of our panelists. So just in a couple of sentences, if you guys can just introduce yourself to the attendees. Ingelof, I'm going to start with you as the founder and CEO of IL People Solutions, as well as the founder of Ideas Exchange Thought Leadership Community, which is why we are on this panel today. Then I'll move to Sharon Benton, who's an independent consultant with experience in executive coaching and leadership skills development. Then to Gaynor Clark, who is the founder of Org Effect South Africa, and then to Sean Naidu as the founder of All Things Are Possible Group. So Inga, I'll hand over to you to do a quick intro.
Thanks, Jen, and welcome to all of our attendees. We are super excited to have you here and be part of the conversation. So Jen, thanks for that, and thank you for that insights that you've shared with us. I think, I've done I don't want to call it a sentence, but I've done almost 20 years in the corporate space. I've been privileged enough to work across public as well as private sectors, also then across a couple of industries. And always been in the realm of performance development, or L&D as everyone knows it, and I've been fortunate enough to work within an organizational effectiveness and talent space, very similar to Gaynor, where it's a culmination of your talent value chain and looking at how we can actually create innovative ways to improve the people experience. And so stepping out of corporate now, that is what my focus is. Very passionate about purpose-driven change, passionate about growth mindset work. So I am an internationally certified NLP practitioner and life coach, and then also a People X or People Experience business consultant. And People X is just a different word for HR, which I'm hoping will catch on and become popular, because at the end of the day, we're not resources, we are people. And our core focus needs to be on the experience of people. And just looking at the word cloud responses, I think I'm preaching to the choir, essentially. So in a nutshell, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Inga. Sharon.
Thanks, Jane. I'm not going to be as long as Inga, I promise, because I'm going to be longer than her. It's just an introduction. I'm Sharon Benching. I guess my blood is skills development. I don't know what color that is. My passion is to support individuals in identifying, or I think in achieving their purpose and their mandate. And so currently I find myself after a long probably a long tenure in probably being full-time employed, probably found myself stepping into the world of independent consulting, enjoying the opportunities to just connect with skills development providers and just organizations to build their footprint, however the golden thread being skills development. So 24 years in the skills development, learning development, leadership is my passion, connecting with people, and I think the future leader is all about creating moments and teachable moments to coach. So I think that's why I'm here, to add that type of value and that type of authenticity. So lovely to be here, and thank you for including me.
Amazing. Thanks, Sharon. Gaynor.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Jen. So my journey is very similar to Inga and Sharon. I've been in corporate for over 20 years. I left the corporate world last year, started my own business. And my passion really, again, similar to Inga, is purpose, helping people, individuals, and organizations find and live their purpose and make a positive impact in the world. I'm also quite passionate about transforming cultures, but I'm also passionate about not just transforming cultures, but just helping organizations become more effective. Sometimes, and I've had quite a few clients say to me, things are okay, I just want more. I want more people experience, I want more performance. It's not every culture that's toxic and bad, but we want people to feel that they're making a difference and that they're adding value. And that's where my passion lies. I love fixing things. I love going in and understanding where the complexities live and how to make that easier, and ultimately enhance the people experience. Thanks, Jen.
Amazing. Thanks, Gaynor. Sean.
Good morning, Jen. Thank you for the opportunity. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being a part of this webinar this morning. Very quickly, my name is Sean Naidu, founder and CEO of the All Things Are Possible Group, also known as the ATAP Group. We are an accredited skills development training company based in South Africa, but over and beyond that, we specialize in leadership and character development. So we do all things character. That's our focus, that's our sweet spot, that's what we specialize in. And I'm looking to add some value to the conversation today by speaking about character. Our approach is very unique. We refer to what we do as provocative empowerment. And so I'm going to be sharing some insights with everybody today that you probably are going to enjoy, but hold on to your seats, because there might be some stuff that is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But I think for the nature of the conversation, it definitely needs to be said. And so I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. Amazing. Thanks, Sean. And you know, maybe let's just stick with you for a bit in the whole concept of character development and the role character does play in a company culture and in building a positive company culture. So the question I have for you, Sean, is what does individual character, especially for leaders and for leadership, have to do with company culture? And we know a lot about skills development, we know a lot about EVP interventions, employee experience interventions, but this whole concept of character development, could you expand on that for us and just provide a couple of examples around how you've seen this work within organizations?
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. So as an introduction, Jen, let me say this. Company culture does not need to change. I'll say that again. Company culture does not need to change. Company culture is the result of change. Company culture is not a problem that needs to be solved. Current company culture is the result of problems that are not being solved. So company culture is not a problem that needs to be solved. Company culture is not broken that it needs to be fixed. Neither is company culture unhealthy that it needs to be healed, and neither is company culture toxic that it needs to be transformed. So I often say that we blame company culture for what the character of leaders and our people are responsible for. And so part of our tagline and our slogan, and it's part of the offering that we have, is that character creates company culture. And I will get into the nitty-gritty of character in a few minutes in terms of how it creates company culture, but character creates company culture. So why do we say character creates company culture? Company culture is more than just an accumulation of individual skill sets and competencies, intelligences, qualifications, gifts and talents and personalities. First and foremost, company culture is an accumulation of individual character, and you cannot get away from that fact. So when we hire people, you are not just hiring the skill sets and the qualifications and the experience of the individual, you are hiring the character of the individual, even though within the recruitment and selection process, unfortunately, not much time and effort is given to prioritizing the character of the individual. And I normally say you are not your skill set, you are not your intelligence, you are not your qualifications, neither are you your title or your position, you are your character. So wherever you are, so too is your character. You cannot separate yourself from your character. So while companies hire skills, they actually also hire character. So companies hire leaders and staff, of course, and based on their qualifications, their levels of experience and their skills and their competence, they assume that leadership will be successful, and this is not a guarantee. We hire people based on the CV interview process and based on what we see, what we like, skills, the expertise, etc. We think this individual is going to be absolutely amazing in our company culture, only later on to find out that it is an absolute disaster in terms of the individual that we've hired. So it's not a guarantee. The presence of strong skills, in other words, competencies, does not guarantee a strong company culture. Think about this. Company culture, maybe even yours for the audience that we have here today, are filled with the highest levels of educated, bright, smart, gifted, talented, intelligent, and knowledgeable and qualified people. Yet despite this, those very same cultures, those very same company cultures are also filled with the highest levels of toxicity, disrespect, abuse, victimization, sabotage, stress, maliciousness, low staff morale, high staff turnover, stress, and decline in employee mental health. The reality is this. The presence of strong skill is never enough to create and sustain a strong, healthy company culture. Now, let me say this. I'm not against skills development, and part of our panelists specialize in skills development. And so I'm not speaking against skills development. Skills development has its place. But let me say this. Skills development at the expense of character development produces a culture of educated bullies. I think that warrants to repeat. Skills development at the expense of character development produces, in fact, it has already produced a culture of educated bullies. So this in itself is proof that it takes much more than strong skills, competencies to create a strong, healthy culture. It takes developing the character of the individual. So skills development will always be critical. There will never not be a need for skills development, but skills development is not the only solution to every company culture, crisis, issue, etc. Character creates company culture. Now, everyone wants healthy company culture, but everyone ignores the character that creates company culture. So whatever the condition of your company culture right now, you may never have thought of it this way, but I can almost guarantee you, whatever the condition of your company culture, healthy or unhealthy, good or strong, whatever, the character of your leaders especially and your people have helped create that culture. So there are many building blocks to building company culture. I'll say that again, there are many building blocks to building company culture, but there is only one foundation, I believe, on which these various building blocks can be built on. Every one of these building blocks needs a foundation, just like building a house. And every one of you is sitting in a room, in a house, in an office right now. You don't see the foundation, but the foundation is there. The structure that you have surrounding you is only standing strong because somebody took the time, the builders took the time to lay the foundation. And on top of the foundation, do you take your building blocks and you build the structure that you want, but no foundation. Where there is no foundation, no structure can stand. So no matter how great the quality of the building blocks, skills, knowledge, talents, education, experience, qualifications, skills development, personal development, leadership development programs, etc. Without the foundation of character, no building, no company culture can ever be successful, can ever be built and ever be sustained. The process of building company culture starts with first laying the foundation of character. And so while my colleagues are going to come and add the blocks and the bricks to the structure of getting to company culture, my part in this process is saying we got to get back to the basics of what company culture consists of, and that is the foundation is character. Nothing successful has ever been built without the foundation of character. So as I land this plane for my section at least, Dr. Miles Monroe said, character is the foundation of leadership. So if character is the foundation of leadership, and leadership creates and influences company culture, then the reality and the fact is this character is indeed the foundation of company culture. At the core of what a leader is and what a leader produces and how they treat people and the culture that they create for them is the personal character of the leader. So character creates company culture. Companies have unfortunately missed the mark when creating and building a strong company culture because their focus is on what contributes to company culture and not the character that builds the company culture. Let me close with this and let me ask just a few questions to our audience before I hand over to Jen. Some food for thought. As a company, as an individual, as an executive that is sitting here today, ask yourself these couple of questions. What company culture do you want? What individual behaviors do you want from your leadership and your employees? Is having leaders and employees of character part of the culture that you want? If yes, then whatever strategy your company has in place, you have to create in whatever strategy your company has in place to create the culture that you want, developing the character of the leaders and of your employees must be part of that strategy. It is impossible to build company culture without building the character of the leaders in that culture. And one last closing statement from myself. We want change, we need change, we all expect change to happen. But let me say this, company culture changes when the company's approach to changing culture changes. I'll repeat that. Company culture changes when companies' approach to changing culture changes. And so what, from my perspective, I'm putting character on the table and I'm saying to companies, you want the culture that you want? Besides focusing on the building blocks, let's get the foundation right. Once the foundation is in its place, everything else that you build will be sustained. But character creates company culture, and change demands change. So whatever change you want in your company culture, it literally does start in the character of the individuals, because ultimately you are your character, and how you treat people, the relationships that you build is based on your character. Jen.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Sean. And thanks for bringing the whole concept of character versus skills development, and how, very often when when there's concerns within an environment or concerns with a particular individual, one of the first things we do is say, all right, you need to go on to this particular training, leadership development training, or assertiveness training, or time management training, or whatever the case is. And I think there is a place, and there is definitely, I mean, Sharon, you will most 100% agree with this, that there is definitely a place for skills development. But I think it's so crucial that we also start looking at the individual and the character of our leadership. Sure, no, but I'm going to jump over to you now, Sharon, given your experience with skills development and the fact that you said your blood is skills development, but more specifically with coaching, and bearing in mind what Sean has put on the table now about character development, what in your mind are the ingredients for sustainable cultural transformation?
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for the question. And probably firstly, I must say that skills development on its own is really not. So Sean is spot on. It really takes a plaster effect if we're only going to focus on placing that person in the classroom and expecting that they are going to transform our culture. It doesn't work like that. It's about what we do before, during, and after. And you know, my introduction to training, one of the first workshops I could attend was to prepare myself in leading others, what their role is in before, during, and after. And so there's some key things that Sean has mentioned. One of my favorite things is that how healthy is your family? How healthy is your organization? And there's been much talk about us not referring to your organization as a family, but that's where most people spend most of the time. Things has changed, I believe, just in terms of the remote work and hybrid work. But you still have a sense of belonging because you belong to this family, and your character. And as Sean is saying, it does start with you. It does start with what is it that you bring to the table in this family. And so for me, really, it is how healthy is your family, how healthy is your organization, and what is the role that skills development before, during, and after plays within the space, and how does coaching create the golden thread? How is that the key ingredient to building just your individuals and building your culture, but also building future fit leaders? And yeah, I think we all know that we are living in a world where things change and life change all the time, an ecosystem that continuously adapt. And so if I'm just a little puzzle piece as an ingredient in this framework that is talking about that structure, that foundation, if any of those puzzle pieces are not doing what they're meant to do because we don't necessarily understand and invest time to get to know them, then it does contribute to us thinking, okay, let me put the plaster on and do some skills development. And that's not really always the answer. So it is all about us. It is about the human in the organization. I think it's about this, and the human in the organization is the same one that breaks or makes the structure or the framework. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter at what level we are. Each of us have a character that is deeply embedded with our own personal values, I believe, but also our own personal beliefs. And yeah, and our past experience. And to me, a past experience is just what happened a minute ago. And so just with Sean's discussion, the past experience is what happened a minute ago. So in my opinion, the key character to building your culture around building diversity, around building, getting to know your multiple generations. We are leading 5 generations at the moment. I think we're all familiar with that. As just showing up is showing interest in people. And then, yeah, that requires time. So often I find myself now in training when it really is evident that even though Sean is saying that leadership is important, and we know leadership is important, and they take the lead within every business, it's strange that you find yourself in training where people come and connect with you because you are showing an interest in each one of them. And so they have conversations with you that you think this conversation you should have had with somebody in the workplace who knows your character a lot better, or they've taken the time to get to know you, but they don't. So they'd rather speak to an external person, and for various reasons, I guess. However, it doesn't mean that all workplaces are like that. I think that a large percentage are doing things right, and I'm sure Gaino and Inga can speak to that. But if we want each puzzle piece to be fully committed to living organizational core behaviors, and it is behavior because value is behavior, then ultimately we need to make the time. It's about investing the time post the skills development. That's it. If we're investing the time post the skills development and getting people across levels together to blue sky, to calibrate, to brainstorm, to go back to the employee opinion surveys. I don't know how often we do that anymore. If you can just go back to those conventional, then I think that we are on our way to understanding what it is that we need to build a culture that is very diverse. And diverse is so much now. I mean, for me, big thing at the moment is just sensitization around understanding people, understanding PWD. That's huge. I mean, I'm sure Inga Gain is also going to speak to understanding people's talent. I mean, when last have we looked at people's CVs to know what it is that they bring to the business, and they were recruited just to do a job. So to survive for me and thrive amid the economic headwinds and agility, we need to build resilience and just an adaptive work culture. We need to develop a mindset of where we put learning and development, probably this constant learning and development, and that we know that skills development doesn't happen in class only. It really is about what's happening before, during, and after. What are managers doing to coach? Do they know how to coach? I think I've said already, my passion stems from people achieving their purpose and their mandate. I've said my bloody skills development. It definitely is. However, the approach we take to skills development has changed. The cookie cut approach is gone. It's about going back to that training cycle and having skills development conversations to see what is it that the individuals in your team needs, and it's about collaboration. It's about finding ways to upskill and to reskill. And then I certainly we have experienced a range of things that's changed over the last few years. There's been a huge just a change in learning and in leadership, and that to me is important when it comes to just changing the landscape of training. Not forgetting technology. I was thinking the other day, if WhatsApp comes up with another thing that changes, I'm going to cancel my app. There's so many things you can't keep up with it, but it's going to go ahead. Nothing's going to change in the AI space, I guess. So one of the side effects of the pandemic that made people rethink their work priorities was that they want more. I think people just wanted more opportunities to grow professionally. They wanted a desire to learn. They wanted to have a purpose. They wanted to have a career. They needed substance. They needed to understand what it is that they want to learn. And so training methodologies have changed. We craft solutions when we connect with people. I think for me, I go in and I want to ensure that learning and development can foster relationships with operations, because there's always these silos that they don't work together, even though we have a common goal. And I think one of the things that I said when we posted to LinkedIn, I mentioned about the traditional ways of doing things, or the traditional theories. We've got to sit back and come up with new ways. But I believe that things like your learning styles, knowing people, going back to things, character is not new. I mean, it's always been there. Adapting those conventional models of experiential learning. It doesn't only happen in class. How are we taking it into the workplace to make it happen? Talking about Bloom's taxonomy, your cognitive domain, your affective domain, your psychomotor, Bellman models. I mean, how do we even use it? How do we reinforce it to look new? And then to just make it real. So and the other thing I suppose for me it is that, so how are we taking the training? And as Sean is saying, it's not about the skills development only. It's about making the training pay off. I write that in every report that I write to a client. What is the extension of the training? How are you making it? How are you making it pay off, and encouraging your staff to reflect on the learning by setting their own goals? And then, of course, plus it's your monitoring and evaluating their progress. How are we making them aware of where they are and what it is that they need to do to achieve what your ultimate personal development discussion with them really is about? And then, I think that to me strengthens morale. I think that what COVID has taught us also with people, and how we could be understanding the character is that I don't like using the word covert anymore because it's so way 2020 now. But I think what it really did for us as leaders is that we got to know people a little bit more. I think we started having personal conversations on a personal level, conversations that we wouldn't necessarily have in the past, and we got this deeper understanding of just psychological safety and inclusion, and it made line managers more aware about the quality of employee experience. I think Kaino alluded to that employee experience earlier, that you've got to put your people first. And so investing in their physical and emotional health definitely fosters for me a sense of belonging, and for them a sense of belonging, but also a sense of inclusion. So, yeah, in my opinion, those are the things that strengthen the work culture. And then, of course, coaching isn't a job. It's a hard thing.
Yeah, I agree.
As leaders, we should be spending most of our time leading. I mean, we're sitting with middle managers, and you spoke, Jen, about burnout. Our middle managers must be burned out. I often refer to them as the jam in the middle of a sandwich. They get pushed down from the top and pushed from the bottom. And we don't want them to leave, because like our tenured not customers, like our tenured employees, they probably know your culture the best. We need
so
them
how
there.
will we learn
We are
from
going
them
to lose our middle managers in particular if we are not investing time and supporting them, not just to be pen pushers. They just pushing paper at the moment. So yeah, their roles continue to become complex. I mean, I had a conversation with a client recently that says these guys are sitting, they're not investing enough time in building staff morale and building relationships. So our middle managers, they were hard hit by the number of changes and the conversations they had to have with people. Their roles continue, in my opinion, is going to become complex with very little support and consequences. We have consequences to losing that tier, and I feel that there's probably going to demand from us within the culture to be able to invest some time there. So just, I mean, we can say a lot. We only have an hour. I hope there's going to be time to talk a lot more. I was just thinking, I mean, there's definitely certain skills that we need to consider when it comes to skills development. For me, there's a big thing now called humanized learning. Okay, there's always going to be a focus on leadership and management. That's going to continue. There's always going to be a focus on AI, not that I'm going to train it ever. And then, yeah, skills development, it allows us to integrate the technology and just the socioeconomic value chain to make it effective. And then it's a continuous, what do we do after to ensure that we're building a culture of where we are coaching and have people's best interests at heart. And that's your golden thread. Yeah.
And you know what I really enjoy about what you say, in Sharon, and I know she's gonna land the big plane with us speaking about growth mindset, but it is coming from that, not what can I fix in this person, but how can I help the individual grow? How can I think of things from a growth mindset? So we've spoken a bit about character, we've spoken a bit about coaching, skills development, how we can utilize these particular tools to build a positive corporate culture. And we also very often hear that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I'm going to move on to Gaynor to really speak about strategy within organizations. We know that having a strategy, a people strategy, a business strategy is fundamental to growth and success. We've got to have a plan, a North Star. So in your experience, Gaynor, especially with the work that you did at Levi, how can you positively, or how can you use strategy development to positively influence culture?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And so for me, the question then becomes, what comes first? Is it strategy or is it culture? And the answer to that question for me is purpose comes first. And so what is the purpose of the organization? What is it that we stand for? I wrote this down. What was the saying that you said? Strategy eats culture for breakfast.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Strategy for breakfast. I'd like to change that and say a purpose-driven culture skyrockets strategy to success. And I firmly believe that. And so some of the work that I do is, and it links back to what Sean spoke about, which is the character. So the foundation and the building block, the first building block is the character. But for me, I would like to add to that and say it's the individual purpose. What do you stand for as an individual? What is your purpose? And so for me, the world is so complex. And so that phrase just encapsulates for me the synergy between culture and strategy that needs to exist. Because purpose, it really keeps us grounded. It keeps us focused. And for me, it keeps our eye on the prize. And that for me is the true North Star. And so you'll notice within your organizations, your strategies will change. So often we look when we go to our quarterly strat sessions, our annual strat sessions, we review our strategy, we revisit our strategy, but it is your purpose as an organization that remains constant. And so Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle, and we can pop it into the chat if you haven't watched his amazing video around the golden circle. Please do yourself a favor. And EC also talks about the fact that if you look at a submarine knows where it needs to go, but it can sometimes course correct. And our strategies is the roadmap essentially for us to be able to achieve our overarching purpose. And so what we need to, the questions that I've asked myself in the corporate world, and this is also if we have HR people on the webinar, we need to understand that our role is not just people and HR, our role is enablement, and how do we help the business achieve its strategies? And so the first question I normally ask with my clients is, how do we connect the head, the heart, and the hands of the individual to enable us to be able to achieve our strategies? And so when we talk about the head, it's how do we help our employees to understand the strategy at each and every single level within the organization. And the challenge here is that the individuals who come up with the strategies are often very clear about what the strategy is. But if you go 1 or 2 levels down, there seems to be a bit of a mismatch around what is the strategy. I actually don't know what the strategy is. So we need to be able to understand that once each and every single person in the organization actually has a level of understanding about the strategy, half the battle is won. Then the question is, how do we connect the heart of the individual to the organization and the strategy? Purpose and values. Each employee within the organization needs to have a deep connection to what the purpose of the organization is. They need to understand what the purpose of the organization is, because when, for example, there's conflict within the organization, there's conflict in a meeting, in the back of our minds, it is not only the values that now drives the behaviors, but it's also our purpose. So if we're getting stuck, we have a difference of opinion, is what we're arguing about or talking about actually enabling the purpose, the deeper purpose of this organization? And I have found that once that is at the back of the mind constantly or in your face constantly, it almost eliminates all this busyness and things that makes us ineffective within an organization. And immediately we feel inspired again to actually come together and solve whatever the problem is. And so the question that I have for the audience is, do you know what your organization's purpose or mission is? Because some people call it a mission. I like to call it a purpose. Some organizations doesn't have a purpose statement or a mission statement. And if you do know what your purpose or your mission statement is, the one thing that we need to understand is that your purpose statement needs to have a what and it needs to have a why. And so the hashtag is start with why. What I have found is that a lot of organizations have a purpose statement that articulates the what, but it doesn't tell us why. Why do you exist and what will the world be missing if you're not around anymore? And that same point I'm going to extend to everyone on the webinar. What is the world going to miss when you're not around anymore? And this is something that the journey I've been on to understand my own purpose has been such an inspiring journey. And it's helped me navigate so many difficult conversations and decisions that I've need to make. And I'm so passionate about helping people find purpose because I truly believe that that is where it starts. And then link what Sean is talking about with character into that. The world can only be a better place. And I know I'm sounding very airy-fairy now, but that's truly what I believe. And so the following question, and so sorry, the question I have for you is, do you know what your purpose statement is? Do you even have a mission statement? And be clear that your purpose statement needs to have a what and a why. And so that's the work that I like to get into and get my hands dirty with, is what is your purpose as an organization? And then how do we connect the heart to that? The hands then gets to the point of, okay, so I understand the strategy, I understand the purpose, I know the values, and in some organizations I go in there and people don't even know what the values are of the organization. They can list it, but they have no comprehension really of what does that mean. And this is where things like a leadership playbook comes in, where you really go in and articulate what do these values mean, how do they show up in the organization, and what does competence within that look like. You actually need to articulate that and expand on that for people. And so then I understand the purpose, I understand the values. Now the effort follows. And how I understand the purpose and how I understand the values is going to determine whether the effort is now becoming discretionary, because that's what we want. That is really the sweet spot for me, is where without provocation, people just want to steer the ship forward and want things to happen. And for me, that really is what we want. We want discretionary effort because A, when I understand what I need to do, and B, when I understand how what I do links to the overall strategy and links to the overall purpose of the organization, the magic's going to start happening within your organization. That much I'm sure of. And so then the discretionary effort helps us execute with passion and clear intent, because we know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And when our purpose is clear, some leaders become very attached to the strategies that they've put together. It's my baby. But when our departure point is purpose, it becomes easier to convince people to shift and navigate. The world has become too complex for us to be able to get stuck on whatever yesterday's strategy was, because the world is shifting and changing so fast. And it is organizations who understands their purpose and who drives everything they do through their purpose that is able to remember the submarine, that is able to navigate, but they're still going to get to their destination. And so in other words, once my heart is connected, the discretionary effort will follow, which creates the high-performing culture we all want, the big buzzword, high-performing culture. And ultimately, that helps us to achieve the overall strategy. But before we even get to purpose, as leaders, we need to understand, and even as people, we need to understand, what is this ecosystem we are operating in? What is this world that we are operating in? Because often leaders are putting these strategies together and we don't actually understand the world. We don't know what's coming our way in the next 2, 3, or 4 years. And this is where frameworks like VUCA and BANI comes in, because now we are able to interrogate all of the strategies that we put together against these frameworks that exist out there. And so it gives us just a completely different perspective as to what it is that we need to be looking for. Future focused. When we look at skills development, and Sharon's right, it's not the age old, same old anymore. We need to be looking at what are the competencies of the future that we need to be building now, because like we saw with COVID, all of a sudden the future was now. If you weren't agile when COVID hit, you probably would have struggled within your organization, because agility was seen as the competency of the future. And when COVID hit, if you were not agile, you were battling, you were struggling. And so we constantly need to be looking at the future and saying, what is required and what's going to be required. Where's the world going? Who is the workforce? Shannon spoke about the 5 generations. Who is the workforce coming in? Do we have people strategies that is already now looking at how we're going to cater to that new generation coming into our workforce? Are we going to be ready? Are we going to be ready for, if you're in the retail space, are you going to be ready for what's coming our way in the next five or even 3 years, because the world shifts so much. And so we need to constantly be looking at what is happening within our organizations, what is happening within the world. How do we connect the head, the hearts, and the hands so that we can get that discretionary effort, so that we can also enhance the employee experience? Because once people understand exactly what they need to do, once people understand that there is a bigger purpose here, I'm actually enabling something much bigger than me, that for me is where employee fulfillment now lives. Because we started off years ago with employee satisfaction, then we moved into employee engagement, and now the buzzword is employee fulfillment. People want to come to work and be fulfilled. And that's really
100%
what we want to do. We want to get to employee fulfillment.
100%. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm just a little bit conscious because I do want to end off with Inga. So again, I mean, the whole concept of purpose and connecting hearts, connecting hands, is really, really important for people to feel like they can belong within an organization and have that positive experience. Inga, IL People Solutions is all about seeking purpose-driven change through a growth mindset. And what we've heard from Gaynor and the other panelists, I'd like to know from you, why does culture change often fall flat within an organization, and what should our audience look out for?
Thanks for that, Jen. And just to preface my response to you is, and all of my fellow panelists alluded to that, is that there's this huge need and hunger for connectedness. There's this huge need for just my purpose, being authentic, and it's symptomatic of a world that is running ahead at a fast pace in terms of tech development. And so what is happening now is you're seeing this chasm and this void for wanting to connect via human connectivity. So I think for me, I've seen a few reasons for that, why culture change sometimes do fall flat. And at the core, I would say it's as simple as our leaders, or we as leaders, we don't listen and we don't allow for co-created environment with our teams. And because that is so simple, we tend to overlook and oversee that cause. So because most employees usually are not given the agency to perform at their full potential. So even though that is what they were recruited for, right? And that for me is a typical example, if I can bring it back to growth mindset, that is the opposite of a fixed mindset. So we all have experienced leaders where they're not open to ideas because it worked before. Why mess with the recipe? So let's stick to that. And so we tend to place the wrong individuals in leadership positions whose primary role is to manage and not lead. So managers are intended to keep people in line. They ensure that they conform and are expected to make decisions that do not necessarily create a conducive environment for their teams to thrive. So, but rather increase profits at the expense of their teams. And so this style of leadership creates an environment of toxicity. We saw that in the cloud, the word cloud. Fear we also saw. It also leads to lack of creativity and innovation, right? It's masked by inauthentic respect for others. In other words, people aren't feeling psychologically safe. So I'm not saying that the last point is incorrect, as we need this type of commercial acumen, right, to ensure a thriving business. But I want to draw the audience attention to those individuals leading a team that recognize the team's expertise. So you want to allow the team some agency to test ideas, and who's not threatened by the thought of failure, but welcomes it. So this is a team where people thrive and people experience psychological safety. They're more creative and innovative. So overall, they perform well. And if they are customer facing, they also deliver excellent customer experiences, which has a positive knock-on effect on revenue, sales, growth. So hint, hint, I'm a huge advocate for systems thinking. So there we go. So in my mind, this is what growth mindset is in action. This is what it looks like. So when a leader recognizes that to be successful is not determined by their previous successes, because life is not a cookie cutting template, right? But rather a leader that has a growth mindset welcomes trial and error in order to innovate. So by extension, this creates and builds a team that is resilient, is ready to take on the knocks of corporate life, and doesn't buckle under the pressure of volatility. So when you want to see a healthy culture change, and by this I'm suggesting that this happens continuously, because it's underpinned by natural attrition, right? And as my fellow colleague said, is that culture is made up of a macrocosm of personalities, behaviors, character types. So be sure that you have people with growth mindsets in positions of influence that promote and drive change. And I mean, there's so many brands out there that no longer exist, that because they had leadership with fixed mindsets. So companies that are still thriving out there, they have leadership with growth mindsets. And so leadership with fixed mindsets, they're afraid to fail. And they kept regurgitating strategies that worked in the past to the point of becoming obsolete. So I hope those two juxtaposition scenarios helps to kind of get a sense of what breaks culture change and what promotes it. Thank you.
Amazing. Inga, quick question to you. What's one piece of advice that you would give executives, you would give leaders within the HR environment around cultural transformation and taking it seriously? What's the one piece of advice you would give them?
I'm just going to reiterate what I said. Keep it simple. Listen to your people. Go create a solution that creates an environment that is conducive to your creativity and innovation. Don't just focus on solving the symptom. Through critical root cause analysis, identify the problem and start there. And lean into the chaos. I think as HR, we're afraid of the chaos, so we kind of focus on the safe thing to fix. But through small increments of change, implemented consistently, that will win the day.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists for bringing those particular or various and quite different perspectives on culture, on corporate culture. How do we shift it? How do we transform it? What are the things to start looking out for? There is a question on this. And Sharon, I think maybe this might be a question for you, given your focus on DE&I and diversity and inclusion. But how or where does DE&I fit into all of this?
Yeah, I think for us as within the space of skills development, I think for me, I've got a big thing on sensitization, and then just taking some time to understand just people, taking some time to understand, and that's why it goes back to if I need to see what it is that leaders need to ensure that they do. It is investing the time and finding ways to instill a culture where we are able to just get to understand what it is that we need to do. Okay, so I hope I'm answering the question.
Yeah, it's 100%. Thanks so much for that. It's about focusing on the individual, in front of you, and I suppose also using a mindset of coaching and curiosity definitely helps us to do that effectively. Gaynor, I don't know if you wanting to add anything from your experience, if you wanting to add anything to that question.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental things that helps us to navigate the DE&I landscape is understanding the neuroscience of our brains. Once we understand why our brains behave, why it behaves, we become more comfortable with understanding how to navigate that landscape. One of the things for me, I have found that DE&I initiatives fail And the question I've always had for many years as an HR practitioner is, why does it fail? When I started understanding the neuroscience of the brain, it all made sense and it all fell into place. So if there's one piece of advice I'd like to give is get to understand the neuroscience of the brain, and then you can work from there from a D&I perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also a huge fan of neuroscience and how we can wire and rewire our brains in order to help us to be more effective as individuals and also just better people at the end of the day. Sean, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add into the conversation. It doesn't have to be specifically about D&I, but just maybe one piece of advice that you have, one last comment for our audience today.
We all know that change is desperately needed in company cultures, and I think that's the reason why we're all here today. We want change. Company culture changes. I'm going to repeat what I said earlier on. Company culture changes when your company's approach to changing culture changes. So unless companies change their perspective and their approach to transforming company culture, there will be no results of change in their company culture. If companies are not willing to change their approach to changing their company culture, and they are not willing to move away from the traditional, like we've been saying, cookie cutter, conventional, academic, theoretical, and generic curriculum-based approaches to changing their culture, then unfortunately they are not ready for change. They want change, they need change, but my question is, are they really ready for change? And from my perspective, and I'm going to repeat what I said, which is the tagline for what we do: character creates company culture. Character creates company culture. And unless companies are getting back to character and including character development as part of their culture strategy, culture change strategy, I think we are going to be building with straws and on straws, because the foundation is really not there. And character development is people don't do character development. They do skills development, they don't do character development. And I'm saying, and this is what we do, we are changing the narrative on what it takes to change and improve company culture in conjunction and collaboration with what all of the other speakers have said as well. Character creates a culture.
But from my side, and just a big thank you to our panelists. Inga, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to say about ideas exchange. I know that there was a comment in the chat that says we need to hear more from this panel. What's coming? So I don't know, Ings, if you want to just give a little bit of a overview of what is to come from ideas exchange. But Inga, I'll hand over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jane, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the audience members who have hung around for so long, and we really appreciate the engagement. Culture is a very loaded topic, so we couldn't pack everything in an hour, as you would have seen. So we are most certainly planning on doing an in-person event coming to Cape Town very soon. So please, if you have not joined the Ideas Exchange community, it's a WhatsApp community. I will be sure to share the link with everyone who has attended the session, as well as a recording of the session, so that you don't miss anything if you had to jump off early. But we will be bringing an in-person event to you very soon. So please watch the space for venue information. Cost for attending the session. It's going to be very collaborative. It's more than just a networking event. It's going to be a mastermind practical, where we walk away with an actual plan. We don't just attend something to sit and have a lovely breakfast, although that will also be served. So yes, that is what is to come, Jen.
Amazing.
That is me. And then please also be sure to follow Ideas Exchange podcast on YouTube, where you will also hopefully see more of my panel members in a one-on-one podcast with me. But thank you to everyone for joining, and have a lovely weekend.